Welcome, and thank you all for joining us here this evening. It is our honor to host Professor Alan Dershowitz this evening, or as I found out today from a childhood friend, Avi Dershowitz. It is our zchut, it is our merit to host a man who has done so much for humanity, and especially the Jewish people. Some people who have achieved fame have not utilized that influence to its fullest. Professor Dershowitz, on the other hand, has used his fame and extraordinary talents to be there for us, to defend Israel and the Jewish people. What might be a little less known, he has also been there for many individuals who have needed his help and guidance, which is a sign of a genuinely caring and good person. I had a conversation today with a childhood friend who is also a dear friend of Professor Dershowitz. His name is Rabbi Dershowitz, a Chabad rabbi of Harvard, where Professor Dershowitz is the faculty advisor. And to use Rabbi Zarfi's words, he said like this: Alan is a true Ohev Yisrael, a true lover of Israel and the Jewish people. For this, we are here this evening not only to hear the wise words of the distinguished professor, but more importantly, to say thank you for all that you have already done and continue to do for Am Yisrael. Again, we are truly honored that the professor is with us here tonight. I would also like to extend a special thank you to the dignitaries who have joined us here this evening. We have our new mayor, Skip Campbell. We wish him much success in leading the city, this wonderful city, to be an even better place for all of us. We have the mayor of Parkland, our neighboring city. We have here with us tonight as well Mr. Abe Fischler, founder and president emeritus of Nova University. And many other distinguished rabbis and leaders of the community. However, we always begin with a Dvar Torah, with some words of Torah. Call up the founder of Chabad Coral Springs, Yossi Denbrick, to open up with a Dvar Torah.
Hello, everybody. What an honor. I did not know that you called a childhood friend to discover that Alan is Avi. I spoke to the Mohel. Abraham Mordechai. It always pays to know the guy with the knife. There is a book written a long time ago, long before Chutzpah. It is the center book of the Torah. It's called Vayikra, Leviticus. When a child goes to a school, a Jewish school, the custom in Chabad is that you don't begin with Genesis, Bereshis, in the beginning. You actually teach every single Jewish boy and girl the first words of the third book of the Torah, Vayikra. It literally means, and he called. He he referring to God, calling Moses, Vayikra. If you study the word Vayikra, what jumps out of the page is that all of the letters are written in the standard size text, except for the last letter of that word. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph. The Aleph is small, diminished. Many sages comment on why the Aleph is in a smaller font size. They all talk about the humility of Moses. He didn't want it to say the word Vayikra. He actually wanted the Aleph out of the book, so that it should read Vayikar, as if God happened to meet Moses. The word Vayikar without the Aleph means a chance encounter. Vayikra means God made an appointment to speak to Moshe, or they made to speak to Moses. This has been the calling card and the chutzpah of the Jewish people. Although we are the most numerically amongst all the peoples of the world, we are the smallest, the least, in terms of pure numbers, insignificant. We have been called to greatness. It is the height of chutzpah that Jews say to the world, we're going to teach you values, ethics, morality. And the fact of the life is that much of what's good in society comes from Vayikra, because we were called and we keep calling out to the world. It's chutzpah. It's the chutzpah that we are proud of. And to use to combat the chutzpah of the rest of the world that says we can do what we want. As already mentioned by Rabbi Friedman, it truly is an honor when you host a Jew who has spent time, effort, and energy of Vayikra, calling out to the world and pointing out what's wrong, and then pointing out what's right. Everyone, thank you for joining us.
We would now like to invite the new mayor of Coral Springs, Mr. Campbell Skip, to please come up and say a short welcome.
We in Coral Springs are truly delighted to have you, Professor, in our community. And I can tell you that I am truly humbled and honored as your new mayor when the Rabbi Friedman asked me to come here to this Chabad in Coral Springs to welcome this distinguished guest. All of you are going to be integral in this TV production, which I find to be very important to the Jewish community. But what you don't realize, it's also very important to humanity, to all of us. And what the professor's going to tell you applies to each and every individual, especially in Coral Springs in the United States. So I know you're going to enjoy tonight's production, and I know you're going to be very part of it. I'd like to say welcome, shalom, to Alan, and I look forward to you having a great production here tonight. Some of you might not know this, but I was in a seminary for 6 years. And the book of Leviticus was something that I had to study. And this is unprepared. So it's coming from the many years ago that I was studying the book of Leviticus. But I guess it's appropriate that you mentioned it tonight because we have a professor of law. And of course, Leviticus is the book of the Torah, which tells us about what to do, what not to do, procedures, and it's important for the life of the Jewish community. So I think the book of Leviticus, with a law professor here, is very appropriate. So Alan, good luck tonight. Unfortunately, I just found out about this a couple days ago, and I have a family function I have to go to, but I have to leave. But I'm looking forward to seeing the production when it comes out on Shalom TV. Shalom to all of you.
Skip, I don't know your Yiddish name because Rabbi Denberg didn't know your moil. I'd now like to call up the mayor from Parkland, Michael, to say a few words as well.
Thank you for having me. Welcome to our neighboring city on behalf of the city of Parkland. Thank you for being here. As a young lawyer, I'm honored to be up here and to witness your speech. As a Jew and as a strong supporter of Israel, I'm grateful for you. And I'm grateful for everything that you do to protect a country that I visited and that I love. And I thank you for everything. God bless.
Also extend blessings on behalf of Senator Jeremy Ring, who actually wanted to be here tonight, but he's on his way serving the people heading up to Tallahassee. Tonight's event would not be possible without the major sponsorship of Life Extensions. We'd like to thank Mr. Bill Fallon, who's here tonight, for being the main sponsor of tonight's event and being the sponsor of the Shalom Show for, I think, close to 30 years. I'd like to ask him to please come up and say a few words.
It's truly an honor to be here tonight. Back in year 1977, I incorporated an organization right here in South Florida. We had a Pompano Beach laboratory. And I set up an organization called the Life Extension Foundation. We're a nonprofit group, and since 1977, we've been growing. We're currently the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging medical group in the world. We have members everywhere. We have an incredible concentration of members right here in South Florida. But what I want to talk about is what's going on today to suppress the dissemination of truthful information. I'm talking about state-sponsored censorship that is resulting in people needlessly dying. An example of what our Life Extension Foundation has been doing is getting information out, such as 1981, we were the first to alert people that if they had cardiac issues, that daily use of low-dose aspirin might very well reduce their risk of having a heart attack. We went to war with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, for over 15 years to force the FDA to allow makers of aspirin to communicate that very simple message that low-dose aspirin may reduce the risk of coronary atherosclerosis, heart attack, ischemic stroke. We forced the FDA to allow that claim, and in doing so, we know we've saved millions of individuals from premature injury and death due to vascular problems. Now you may wonder, what connection is there to a science-based organization? Life Extension is a science-based organization. Why have we been the longest-term supporters of the Shalom Show? Richard Peretz is the founder of the Shalom Show. He's been airing this nationwide for over 30 years. And we have been the primary supporters of Richard's Shalom Show. Now, there's a reason for that. Richard Peretz, he's the son of Holocaust survivors. And he is getting out information every single week about important Jewish issues, about important issues about Israel. But from our standpoint, he is educating in a non-soundbite way. 30 minutes of educational information that we feel is of benefit to mankind. And since we have the most distinguished law professor sitting right beside me, I want to give everyone a little bit of a view of what Life Extension's law, or view of the law should be. Life Extension views any law that diminishes humanity in any way or any form as an illegitimate law that is too often used by governments to suppress truthful information. These illegitimate laws that diminish humanity are also used as a framework for crimes against humanity. And we at Life Extension want to suppress every single law that is causing people to needlessly suffer and die. I'm going to give you a brief example of how this law works. It is illegal in this country right now to disseminate information about a drug that the FDA has not approved of. Even an FDA-approved drug in which the use has not been approved of, such as low-dose aspirin. In 1981, aspirin was legal, except you couldn't communicate information about its potential to reduce heart attack risk. So since I have Alan Dershowitz right next to me, I feel very comfortable about saying that this particular drug, called Tagamet, I'm sure you've all heard about it, it's a heartburn remedy, but it has an interesting side effect. And here's where I'm breaking the law right in front of everybody. I'm going to tell you right now what the side effect of Tagamet is. If you have cancer and you properly use this drug, you may reduce your risk of that cancer killing you by about 50%. This is information that manifested in the early 1980s. Our Life Extension Foundation published this information. We talked about it, but nobody listened. In 1996, the journal The Lancet, one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals, published a study of colon cancer patients. Half the cancer patients were given cimetidine 5 days before surgery. Cimetidine is a generic name, by the way, for Tagamet. You can buy this in Walgreens, CVS, Walmart. It's available everywhere, very inexpensive. But half the group were given cimetidine 5 days before colorectal surgery. The other group just got the standard therapy. Both groups did get standard therapy. One was fortunate enough to get cimetidine. And I'm going to tell you right now why they were so fortunate. 3 years out, 41% of the people in the group who were not getting the cimetidine were dead. They died primarily of metastatic colon cancer. In the fortunate study group to receive the cimetidine, after 3 years, only 7% of them had died. That's a 6-fold improvement in 3-year survival using an over-the-counter drug. Doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not patented for the use in cancer treatment. Anybody can use this, but it's illegal to tell you about it. And that's a law that we have to abolish. So I can't tell you how proud I am to be introducing a man who has succeeded in abolishing censorship. He succeeded in defending us against illogical laws, illegitimate laws, and in getting the word out about what we must do to continue defending our freedom against the inappropriate use of laws to diminish humanity. Alan, I can't tell you how proud I am.
Now get straight to our program. Really big Yashar Koyach, big thanks to Mr. Richard Perez. Without him, this would not be here tonight. On a personal level, Richard has been a friend of Chabad for many, many years. We wish him good health. We wish him the koyach, the strength to be able to continue to do the good work that he's doing for many, many years to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and honor to be with you here today. I'm going to say a few words before we begin, and then this will become a TV production which you will witness here. I'd like to acknowledge all of you. We're all friends and family, and I really am proud and happy to have you with us here today. Rabbis and all of you, and Brigitte, my daughter Maya, friends and family, and of course we even have a world-famous artist, Tia Crystal, here. And my dear friend Abe Fischler, President Emeritus and founder of Nova University, right here with his wife Shirley. Thank you for being with us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, with us now is Alan Dershowitz. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show, sir.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be on you. Particular pleasure to be here among so many friends, great rabbis, people who I grew up with. You know, we talk about 2 degrees of separation. I like to talk about Jew degrees of separation. I know so many of you in so many different contexts that it's just a pleasure to be in front of you as an audience.
A serious question I have to ask you is this. Here we are today among friends and family, but in this day and age of so much misinformation and lies by omission in the media, where anti-Semitism is on such a horrific level today, Why is it essential for neither Jew nor Gentile in our world to forget that the atrocities perpetrated by Nazi Germany against the Jewish people and many millions of others in World War II actually did take place? Why is it essential for people to remember the lessons of the Holocaust?
Okay, I just want to make one correction in your statement. The Holocaust was not brought about only by Nazis or even only by Germans. The Holocaust could not have succeeded without the cooperation of millions of French people, Latvians, Estonians, Dutch people. The only people really in Europe who escape condemnation are the Bulgarians, the Danish, and you can really count the countries on one hand. The Holocaust was a European phenomenon, not only a German phenomenon. The local population didn't even wait for the Germans to come. In Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia, the native population started to kill Jews as soon as the Soviet Union left those countries. And I think it's a very serious mistake and a misunderstanding to focus only on Germany. And the reason for that is that it's the very grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the French who deported more Jews to Auschwitz than the Germans even asked for. And it's the grandchildren of the people from other countries in Europe who are now expressing the kind of anti-Semitism we're talking about. I just came back from a tour of Europe. I started out in Prague, speaking at the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Terezin and some of the other death camps. From there I went to Dresden and to Berlin and to Nuremberg and to Cologne and to Brussels and to Paris. And I don't generally wear a kippah except when I'm in a synagogue, but in Paris I put on my kippah. And I wanted to make it clear that a Jew has the right to wear a kippah anywhere in the world and must be protected, not by other Jews, but by the country to which he is a citizen or to which she is a citizen. A woman is entitled to wear a sheitel, a Chabadnik is entitled to wear a beard and to show their Jewishness in every visible way. There are 4 or 5 different kinds of anti-Semitism, and we should never confuse them. Although they relate to each other. There is the anti-Semitism we're seeing now in Greece and Hungary, which is old-fashioned neo-Nazi anti-Semitism. The fascists are coming back. They hate the Jews. They hate the Muslims. They're nationalists, they're ultra-nationalists, etc. That's one form. Second is Islamic anti-Semitism, and there's a terrible myth about that. And the myth is that it's only a few percent, 2%, 5%, 10%. That may be true of the people who are prepared to engage in violence or prepared to put swastikas on synagogues. But polls show that anti-Semitic feelings are very deeply pervasive among a very significant number of Muslims in England, in France, and all through Western Europe. And that's a problem that we have to confront. And then I think the most dangerous form of anti-Semitism, and the newest form, is academic anti-Semitism of the kind I experience when I speak on college campuses all over the world. And it's the morphing of anti-Zionism into anti-Semitism, and believe it or not, with a dose of Holocaust denial. Let me give you an example. This may not seem obvious to you. But how many times have you heard from college and university professors in this country and certainly in Europe that, quote, what the Nazis did to the Jews is no worse than what Israel is doing to the Palestinians? One hears that all the time. It's basically a mantra of the boycott, divestment, sanction, BDS movement. Think about that for a moment. That is a deep form of Holocaust denial. Because if all the Nazis did to the Jews of Europe is what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, maybe having a few settlements, taking a little land, maybe overreacting, you might argue, in Gaza, taking the worst case scenario, then there were no death chambers, there were no gas chambers, there were no mobile killing squads, there were no mobile gas squads, there was no genocide. So that's a form of Holocaust denial that has become acceptable on university campuses today. And the morphing of anti-Zionism into anti-Semitism under the cover of political debate, oh, we're not anti-Semitic, we just don't like the nation state of the Jewish people, is, to my view, the most dangerous form of anti-Semitism. And so we can never forget. We can never forget what happened. We can never forget that it's always possible to recur. We can never forget that where it began in Germany and in Austria were the most cultured people in the world, the people who produced Beethoven and Mozart, also produced Goebbels and Goering and Hitler. And there is no safety in culture, and there's no safety in intellect. It could happen anywhere, and that's why we can never rest until we combat it at every point, at every turn. You know, the rabbi talked about Vayikra, which we begin reading now, and talked about chutzpah. The interesting thing is where the word chutzpah comes from, and the first time it's ever used in the Talmud is when Abraham argued with God over the sinners of Sodom. And the Talmud describes that as chutzpah kala'apei shemaya, that chutzpah, even with regard to the heavens, was what Abraham talked about. And you mentioned my name is Avraham, and I like to think of myself, I like to think of myself as aspiring to that kind of chutzpah. In fact, I have a new book coming out soon. It's called Abraham, the world's first, but certainly not last, Jewish lawyer. And it's about Abraham and how he really was the stimulus for the legal profession, and how so many Jewish lawyers have shattered idols, how many Jewish lawyers have argued with authority, how many Jewish lawyers have engaged in brilliant real estate transactions, the way Abraham did in buying the kever for his wife, how lawyers engage in pidyon shivuim, the rescue of prisoners, which is what Abraham did with his nephew Lot. So, we all aspire to act in the tradition of Abraham, but being a Jew, there's one thing, it's great to be a Jew. I would never, if I had a choice, if there were, before you were born, you were given an option, of anything, I would say, I want to be born a Jew. But being a Jew means you can never say, it's over, we're at peace, we can relax now. Sometimes you have to look over your right shoulder, sometimes you have to over your left shoulder, but you're always having to look over some shoulder, because being a Jew means never being at peace. I'll tell you a funny story about that, and then we'll get to the next question. So there's a wonderful scene in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, which, by the way, was produced by Shakespeare as a comedy. The Jew Shylock was presented with a bulbous nose and red hair, and people laughed at him. And you'll remember the end of The Merchant of Venice. Shylock is forced to choose between being killed or converting to Christianity. And he converts to Christianity. And he's asked the following question after he agrees to be a Christian. Are you content? And he says, yes, I am content. The best proof that he was no longer a Jew. Jews are never content. Jews always have to make sure that the next battle is being well fought.
Alan, that was very, very important and very moving to all of us. I'd like to change topics and ask you a little bit about the issues that concern us in this day and age also, which happens to be the threat in the Middle East. There's great controversy with regard to Iran's aspirations to become a nuclear power. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been writing about the dangers of an Iranian nuclear threat for the last 10 years. And I have had lengthy, detailed discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu and with President Obama, both, about this issue. And I'll tell you about a conversation I had with President Obama. At his invitation, he asked me to come to the Oval Office. I sat next to him for a long period of time, like I'm sitting next to you, and he said to me, Alan, you've known me for a long time. You know I don't bluff. You know that you can take my word. I promise you that Iran will never be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. He looked me in the eye and he told me that. And I think at the time he told me that, he believed it. But clearly that is no longer the policy of the United States. The policy of the United States is now, as we understand it, as Henry Kissinger has said, not to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, but to control its development, to contain its use of nuclear weapons. And I think this deal, I have to tell you, I would not allow the Obama administration to negotiate a 1-month lease for me. These are the worst negotiators in 50 years of experience as a lawyer, and believe me, I've negotiated plenty. All of us who are lawyers in this room know our primary job is to negotiate plea bargains, to negotiate. I have never seen a more inept group of negotiators. They have made it public, out loud, that any deal essentially is better than no deal, and they are therefore giving the Iranians a veto over almost any other deal. Let me give you one striking example. The Iranians have demanded a sunset provision. What is a sunset provision? A sunset provision means after that number of years expires, the deal is off, and Iran is then entitled to continue to develop nuclear weapons. Now, they say they're not interested in developing nuclear weapons. They even have a fatwa against developing nuclear weapons, and if you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you, but this is far, far more important. And the current deal on the table, we don't know whether it'll change or not, and hopefully Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech may have caused it to change a bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the current deal on the table sunsets this deal at 10 years, which means in 6 or 7 years, Iran will begin seriously to move toward developing nuclear weapons. And it's unconditional. And what Prime Minister Netanyahu, I thought, brilliantly said in his speech to Congress, I was there, I was sitting next to Elie Wiesel and Sarah Netanyahu. What I thought he did brilliantly is he said essentially to Congress and to the President, look, if you cannot get the Iranians to agree to the 3 basic conditions, stop threatening the existence of Israel, stop exporting terrorism, and stop interfering with all the neighboring countries like Lebanon and Syria and other countries, if you can't get them to agree to those 3 conditions before they sign the deal, at least require them to agree to those 3 conditions before the deal ends in 8 years, in 9 years, or in 10 years. That is an excellent proposal. And when Netanyahu made that proposal, he was attacked by the Obama administration saying, you're ruining the deal for us. The Iranians will never accept that. Well, who ever heard of a deal where one side gets to determine what will be accepted? You have to demand of the Iranians that the deal is not over unless and until they comply with those conditions. So I think at the moment the deal on the table is a bad deal. I think that Congress has the authority under the Constitution, and here's an area, I'm not an expert on nuclear power, but I am an expert on constitutional separation of powers. And our system of government is not a presidential system. It's a system of checks and balances. You know, when people say, when Hillary Clinton, who's a friend of mine who I like, described and said the letter to the senators, from the senators, is interfering with the ability of our commander-in-chief to negotiate a treaty. He is not our commander-in-chief. He is the commander-in-chief only of the Army, the Navy, and the militia. The president cannot come into this room and command you to do anything unless you're a soldier or a sailor. The reason we have in our Constitution that the president is the commander-in-chief of the Army, the Navy, and the militia is to make sure we have civilian control over the military. It's another form of check and balance. But when it comes to negotiating treaty, the president is simply the head of the executive branch of the government. And we have a government that is based on 3 branches. They're co-equal. And Congress must be consulted before a deal that is the most important foreign policy decision of the 21st century goes into effect. And right now, there is not a majority, either in the Senate or in the House, to approve this deal. And the most recent election was not the election of President Obama, but the election of Congress. And Congress voted for people who are not in favor of this deal. And therefore, there is a real problem that's going to occur. We're going to have a crisis in government if the president accepts a deal, denies Congress the right to have any input on the deal. Right now, we're being told by the administration, don't complain about the deal, it's too early. But as soon as the deal is struck, they're going to say, don't complain about the deal, it's too late. When are we supposed to complain about the deal? When do the people get the right to have some input? And by the way, if you think this is a deal about which Israelis are divided, forget about it. David Grossman, who was the most liberal, hard left critic of Obama, recently wrote a column in which he said, critic of Netanyahu, in which he said, don't vote for Netanyahu. He's terrible. Don't vote for him. But read what he said. He's right about this deal. All the political parties in Israel are against this deal. This is not a good deal from anyone's point of view in Israel. The only Jewish group I know of that seems to favor this deal is J Street. And J Street has done a great many things that have undercut Israel's security and the security of the United States. So, as a proud American, as a patriot, as somebody who wants to do what's best for America, I stand in strong opposition to this deal. I stand in strong opposition to the president having a unilateral authority to make this deal. And I will stand up and I will argue, if it takes arguing in the courts, in the United States Supreme Court, that Congress has the full authority and power. Whether this is a treaty or not, people can debate. If it's not a treaty, by the way, it means any future president can abrogate it as soon as that future president is elected, or any future Congress can abrogate it. If you make it a treaty, which requires the consent of the Senate, or a deal that requires the approval of both the House and the Senate, then it becomes a legal matter, and then it becomes something that can't be abrogated. So the White House is trying to have it both ways. They want to have an enduring permanent deal, but they want to make it themselves, and they don't want to have any input from Congress. So I think as patriotic Americans, as people who love our country, we should stand up in opposition to this very, very bad deal. One second. And one more point about that. Do not let anybody ever accuse you of dual loyalty. We are Americans. We have contributed disproportionately to the great success of this country. We have been the American dream in terms of coming over, as all of our grandparents did, with no money in their pockets and becoming great successes who have contributed so much to America. We not only have the right as Jews to tell our government what we think is best for America, for the world, and for America's strongest ally, we have an obligation to do it. And do not let anybody accuse you of dual loyalty, any more than you would ever accuse a member of any other ethnic group or religious group of dual loyalty, any more than you would accuse a woman of dual loyalty if she stands up for issues of feminism, or an African American of dual loyalty who stands up for racial justice. We all have multiple loyalties. That's one of the great aspects of America as a mosaic or a melting pot. We are entitled to preserve our own integrity as a group. We're entitled to remain loyal Americans and loyal Jews, and we're the only group that's called dually loyal. We were accused of dual loyalty by Pharaoh back in the book of Exodus. We were accused of dual loyalty by Haman in the book of Esther. And the accusations have always been false. So be patriotic Americans. Stand up for what you think is best for America. And if you think this is a bad deal for America, never be afraid to express that view.
Alan, we have to pause for a few moments for these commercials. We'll be right back.